Hi everyone, today I decided to play with my Casein paints again. It's been way too long and I've been meaning to do that for a while, and recently a few people have asked me how I still like it. But I must admit that since I played with them the first time around about 2-3 years ago, I haven't touched them because I had so much fun playing with gouache and acrylic gouache. So now that I'm more familiar with gouache and acrylic gouache, I wanted to play with Casein to see how they compare and if they're at all similar or what differences do they have. So I took all my tubes out, and I must tell you that when I first started playing with them, I liked them so much that I ended up buying the whole line. I've got all the colors, which is not that many. I can't actually remember, maybe 36, something like that. But I do have all the colors, so I made a color chart. And the first thing that I noticed when I opened the tubes is that they didn't dry out, but they turned jello-y or plasticky. Not plasticky. How can I describe that? It's like a rubbery goo or like a thick jello. So it was not super easy. You can't really re-wet that because it just turns into small particles and rather than a creamy paste. So I was able to, after removing some of those jello-y parts, to finally get some fresh paint in the tube. It was easier with some tubes than others. If you're not using your Casein very often, I think it would be great to store them in airtight containers. Other than that, they worked just fine. They didn't dry out at all. They were not dry like if you had put them in a traveling palette, for instance, in half pans or something like that. So by doing that color chart, I was able to find out which colors were more opaque than the others and what they look like when they're dry. You must know that they dry a lot darker than when wet. So that's something to know. Now, Casein paint, when they're dry, they can re-wet a tiny little bit, but really not much. You cannot move it around again like watercolor or like gouache. That said, they're not like acrylic gouache where they dry like acrylic paint. They still dry matte, but they're slightly re-wettable. So they're kind of in between gouache and acrylic gouache, I would say. It's a nice in between. They're a lot thicker, a lot pastier than gouache or acrylic gouache. And I had a hard time using them at first because I'm so used to the creamier, slightly more liquid gouache and acrylic gouache. So I had to play with the amount of water that I had to add to get the consistency that I wanted. Not too much so it doesn't dilute it too much, so it doesn't get it too transparent, but enough to make it flow nicely on the paper. So of course, the best way for me to compare it with the gouache that I've been playing with was to paint a Ghibli scene. And this time I chose one from Porco Rosso. I picked a pretty small format, so it was kind of tricky to add all the details. And it can be tough when you're trying a new medium to do a small format just because you have to focus on the tiny little details. But Casein is so close to gouache and acrylic gouache that I didn't have much trouble using it. It was a lot of fun. It's opaque and you can paint dark on light, light on dark, whichever way you want. You can blend it nicely. It does dry pretty fast, but you still have a good window of re-wettability. So even if it's starting to dry, you can still add some water and spread it a little bit. Whereas when it's really dry, several days, then it's very hard to re-wet it. Now, the really good part with Casein is that it's very good quality paint and the colors are light fast. So if you want to make a piece and sell it, then you don't have to worry about the colors fading after a while. Unlike gouache, although nowadays some brands are really good and they don't fade as much as the designer gouache, for instance. So that's something to keep in mind with Casein. The bad thing, and it's not going to be bad for everybody, it has a certain smell. It's not a toxic smell. It's not bad for your health either. But for people who are sensitive to smells, it might not be very enjoyable. And like I said, it's more like Think about kids' tempera paint. You know, when you go to a preschool and you smell the paint in the air, it's not the same smell, but it's the same idea. It's the smell of the paint. It's the smell of Casein paint. It's very distinctive. Again, not a bad smell, just a smell that's there all the time. So anyways, all in all, I'm pleased with my painting, with my experience with Casein. When I was done, I noticed that part of the house was a little crooked, especially on the roof. The windows, the center windows were not lining up. So off camera later on, after I noticed it, I changed it. So you'll see in the end, I took a picture where I corrected it. I kind of cheated and I added some more leaves to make it look fuller and more centered. Alright, that's it for now. Let me know if you've tried Casein before and if you enjoy it. I think it's really nice paint. I just need to make sure that I keep them safe from wasting away, from not drying, but turning into jellified paint, because that would be such a waste. And I'm going to try to make a conscious effort to use them more often. I've used them on canvas before and it's a lot of fun. And because they're a little thicker than gouache, it kind of is between gouache and oil. It's not as creamy and oily as oil paint, but you know, it's out there. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're feeling extra generous and you would like to support this channel, you can always click on the thanks button right next to the share button. Thank you all for stopping by. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon with another video. Bye bye.